morning and welcome back to the channel. Well, Strangford Lough still keeps bringing up the gold or the mud, whichever way you look at it. We made it to Strangford Lough, as you saw in our last video, but the dramas didn't stop there. Keep watching for a segment that we haven't told anybody. There is no post on this. We were really embarrassed about it and quite shaken, so keep watching for that. If you saw our last video, you'd know that we're now inviting people to come sailing with us. So if you'd like to join us in the Med this year, jump on board to the website ospreysailingadventures.com. All the information's there. Oh, we got some wind, Julie. I need my glasses on for this bit. So how did it happen? We'd anchored up outside the sailing club, as you saw, right on their start line actually, which they were so sweet. They came and invited us to a barbecue, but we had no idea we were in their start line. We just anchored outside the moorings, and then all of a sudden all these yachts started coming at us, and the Commodore sailed around us and then said, "Hey, come to our barbecue after sailing, we'd love to chat with you." So that was wonderful. Tony, after 3 pints of Guinness, he's doing all right so far. Heading off to a pub for a little more Irish hospitality. But how did we end up how we ended up? Well, after the barbecue, we had a bit of a bumpy night. It wasn't very flat and very calm. So we'd been told about this other sailing club around the corner called the Coil. This is happening off our anchorage. Beautiful smooth waters, lots of moorings, and a club with a jetty. We could go there. And a lot of the members from Killyleagh Sailing Club are members at the Coil, and they said, yes, come on down, you can tie onto the jetty. So we thought, great, wouldn't that be great? So we head on down to the Coil. It's blowing. Now there were a lot of moorings, very close, relatively small boats. Osprey stood out like a sore thumb. We came to come into the jetty. The entrance is very, very narrow. There's not really an entrance. It's a jetty with a big rock off the front. And there's a stick. And we got told, stick to one side of the stick. Except we couldn't identify what was the right side. So we're coming down to the jetty. It's very tight for me to turn around and back in. I didn't want to drive in forward because that would mean that I'd have to reverse out past the rock. And it's always better to drive out forward. So I really wanted to turn around. But it was windy, and trying to turn the boat around in this very confined space with all the boats, it was just too hard. And you know, my experience of handling the boat at that point under motor was still very, I was still quite nervous. So we went beyond the moorings. None of the moorings were suitable for us. They all looked like just small boat stuff. So I thought, well, we'll just go and anchor beyond the moorings. Found ourselves a space that was very, very deep, anchoring in about 16 metres. But we put the anchor down, went ashore, checked out the club, had a beer. Everything was great. Choke. There she goes. All right. Are you ready, darling? It's miserable. This is Ireland. All right, let's go. Out there somewhere. Here's where we were yesterday. And the sun was shining. And here we are going down the river. Just go fast. Let's not get wet. Everything was great. Came back, went to bed. We thought, yep, this will do us for a few days while we sort out we needed to source a mechanic. We woke up in the morning and I thought I felt the boat move. Now, we did have an anchor watch on all night and that was fine. I thought I felt the boat move. There was a sudden gust of wind. So I come up on deck and I kid you not, we've gone only about 100 yards, but we had drifted between two moorings and our anchor was somewhere between two moorings. And we were still going backwards and the only thing behind us was more mud. So by this stage we were only in about 1.5 meters. So it was a quick up with the anchor and then decide where are we going to go. The sun was shining, thankfully, the rain had gone. So we look to our right and there's what looks like a 50-foot ketch anchored. Now I had passed that boat on the way in and it didn't look very protected from the wind. There was some very strong wind gusts. But he was sitting there happily, he had a riding sail on, and I just wanted something a bit more protected, which is why I snuck in closer to the mooring section. Even though there was no wind, I didn't feel like, talking of anchor alarms, let me just turn that off. I didn't feel like going along to the jetty at that time. It was very early in the morning. There had been another boat sitting on the jetty. And I just felt that it would just be rude to front up and just tie up. I really wanted to sort of be there when somebody was there to invite us or assist us. So we thought, well, we'll go and anchor where that 50-footer is. The wind that we'd had the night before had passed, and so maybe it would be okay. So we went and put the anchor down. Now, as we're motoring around, the depth sounder is going from 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, 9, 8. I couldn't find a flat space to put the anchor down. Tony's getting frustrated. I'm going around in circles. And he yells back at me, just put it down when we get to 8 meters. So I went, oh, all right then. You want to put it in 8 meters? I'll put it in 8 meters. So I did. And, stuck it in. It grabbed pretty quickly. We got a good solid hold. Tony was proud of himself. He was pleased. He worked it out. Bearing in mind, Tony doesn't have a lot of anchoring experience at this point. So, anyway, we were sitting there happily. We'd had lunch. We had dinner. We'd gone down to the yacht club and checked out the jetty again, and they'd said, yep, you can come along any time you like. And we thought, well, we're set now, we'll see how it goes, but if it changes, maybe the following day we'd come down, because there was more wind coming, and we thought we'll come down the following day before the wind came in, because we'd noticed that first thing in the morning it's completely calm, and by the afternoon it's howling. Anyway, the weather forecast for this particular evening was calm, and you do pay to be on the jetty, so we thought, well, we'll come tomorrow for the bad weather. So we're back on board and just sort of, it's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I think, and we're just sort of relaxing, and then all of a sudden we felt a bump. And we looked at each other. Did we just touch bottom? Now, we'd anchored in 8 meters, and we knew that the tide there was quite a lot. I can't remember off the top of my head how much it was, but they get big tides. And the mud was receding. But we'd done our maths, we should be fine. So I turn on the depth sounder. We've got 1/2 meter underneath us. How can that happen? Like, the tide's still got a couple of hours to go. How can that happen? So Tony runs forward to pull up the anchor, and as we go forward, we hit again. So we'd obviously found ourselves a little ripple, a little sort of flow in the ground. We hit again. And I knew from the way we hit the second time, when I say hit, it was mud, so we just sort of slid into it. When we went into it the second time, I knew we weren't coming out. So Tony's doing his absolute nut on the bow. I'm using the bow thruster to try and bow thruster off, try and see if I can twist us around. But you can't keep powering up the bow thruster. If you just keep your finger on the button, it's an electric bow thruster, it's going to overheat, and it's got an overheating shutoff. So therefore you end up with no bow thruster. so you can only use it in short bursts. It's not designed to drive the boat. So he's yelling more bow thruster, and I've just stopped because I knew there was no point. And he's yelling more bow thruster, more bow thruster. Must have been very interesting for the guys on the other ketch. Thankfully the rudder wasn't in the mud, so by going onto that next bump and staying there, the rudder was now in the deep spot where we had previously been. It was at that point I decided to test the depths, and I got out our lead line. So a lead line is a rope which is measured in meters with a weight on the end, and you throw it over the side to see where the depth is, because I thought, is our depth sounder reading wrongly? So I go to the bow and I threw the depth sounder, and the bow is in 8 meters. I come to the stern and the rudder is in 0.5 meter, but we are hard aground. Work that one out. Again, had I had Navionics sonar charts, I would have seen that. So of course the tide's still got a couple of hours to go, hasn't it? So where's that mean? What does that mean for us? Where are we going? Well, of course we're going, aren't we? Talk about embarrassing. So I was thinking, but that boat over there, he's upright. He's not going to lean over. So we went from grumpy, peed off, yelling at each other, blaming each other, to laughing, and just sort of wondering what happens next. So we hung a few fenders over the side just in case she did go. I didn't think she would go all the way over because we were literally just on the lip, but you know, would we end up completely high and dry? You know, it's a sort of common thing in the UK. It's not that big a deal. Like, you just lay over in the mud, and when the tide comes back up again, you just gently straighten back up again. So it's not really that big a deal. There's no danger to the boat or anything. It's just embarrassing. So we just sat there, and bit by bit by bit, the boat laid over and laid over and laid over till the water was just below our hull windows. So as I say, we didn't go all the way over, we went about that far. And so we just stayed down below. We didn't want people going past to laugh at us and see us. Anyway, she came back up all right, but yeah, that was just truly embarrassing. Once we got her up and got floating, we went out into the deeper water, which was 16 meters. And we anchored there. And then in the morning we got up and we went down and we got on the coil jetty, and I didn't care what the weather was doing or what was happening, we were getting on that jetty. Okay, so just for a bit of reference, this is Strangford Lough, this is the town of Strangford, this is Porter Ferry, this is where the ferries do their ferry gliding across the river. So the first night we anchored round here in Audley Roads, by Castle Ward, which is a beautiful, beautiful castle over here. And there's a little sailing club here as well, so a nice little pretty spot. And then we came, the next day we came round to the Lough Sailing Club, which is here. And we anchored there. And you can see right there on that point that that's where the sailing club is. And we thought, great, well, you know, Saturday looks like everybody was getting ready to sail. Well, of course, that was their start line, but it turned out it was one of those virtual start lines. It wasn't a marked buoy that we could actually go, oh, that's a race course. So the next day we came round to, and you can see our track going backwards and forwards a few times. So we've come down, gone to look at the jetty, but it was too windy, we couldn't get in. So we've come back out. All through here is just tracked with moorings, and you can see how shallow it is. So our first anchor point was here. That's where we dragged the first time. So you can see we've come down, and you can see this line here, that's the straight drag back. Now there was a couple of small boats anchored here. This is less than 3 meters, and this is the deep channel. So that's our straight drag the first time. So the second time I thought, right, forget that, we'll go over here. And you can see from here, this is where we sat in the mud. Now, I didn't have Navionics, did I? And looking across at the other boat that was sat upright, I was wondering, well, we're almost alongside each other, what's the difference? Of course, had I had navionics, you'll see why. This is where the other yacht was anchored, and this is where we anchored. In fact, that spot there, that's where we anchored. That's probably where we went the second time to anchor. Now, each of these lines is a metre of depth, and I've got this set for 10 metres. So all the white section is deeper than 10 metres. All the blue section is shallowing by a metre. So you've got 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, and da-da-da. This green, this is drying, this is mud, and this is the land. So you would think I should be fine. No. It was so steeply sided that what I realised is that on a 60-foot boat, you can have 10 metres off the bow and be aground on the stern. And that was a very steep learning curve for us that day. And something that we've never forgotten is that when we're in somewhere like this, we take a depth line off the bow and we take a depth line off the stern. And going through Scotland, we did that multiple times so that this never ever happened again. All of this at high tide, by the way, is underwater. So it looks like a great area for motoring, but there's a very small channel. And all of this is taken up with moorings to about here. The moorings literally finish about here. So all of this is moorings. And then getting into the jetty, let's have a look at that. So you can see our pass is trying to come in the first time. And first time I was going to come in on this side because there was a boat here. But there's a rock just here. It's not really shown on this chart. You can see a stick. There are two sticks. And I was going to come in here the first time. And it was only after talking to the locals they said don't come down that side because the rock extends here. You can see that channel coming out. Come in on this side, it's deeper. And this is only 2-3 metres, so it's not hugely deep, but it's about, I think it's about 3.5 metres max. And we stayed there for a few days. So we still had to find a mechanic to manage the, to look at the engine. And that was proving quite tricky because there were basically only two in the area. One was based round in Ardglass, but we couldn't get into Ardglass because Ardglass was too shallow. And that meant going back down Strangford Lough and out into the Irish Sea and into Ardglass. But we couldn't get in there. They gave us a reference for a fellow in Strangford. And through talking to people at the yacht club, we got a reference for another guy. And I figured, well, that was a good reference. So we called Michael and we called the other fellow in Strangford. And but they needed us to be alongside. The only two jetties that we could fit on in Strangford Lough was at the Coil or in Strangford itself. Now the jetty at Strangford, you can go alongside. It is really up to the harbour master's control as to whether you can get on. You can't just front up and tie up. And there's really only room for one boat, and they give priority to the ferries and any other vessel that's there. So one of the mechanics rang the harbour master and said we needed to come alongside because we had no engine, and there was another gale coming. Like there's always gales. It was gale after gale after gale. So we had to get on this Strangford jetty because there was no option. And having had our anchoring problems in Strangford, we were looking everywhere to find somewhere safe that we could stay for a few days. We couldn't stay on the Coil jetty indefinitely because on the weekends they use it for racing yachts. So it's only available to stay on Monday to Friday, which meant that we'd have to get off for a couple of days, which we could have done. And they were very happy for us to stay there as long as we needed. However, once that engine was taken apart, we wouldn't be able to move. And there was potential that we wouldn't get fixed for weeks. So we got one mechanic, got us onto Strangford jetty, and then the wind came. So I was very grateful to be there because it was blowing about 30-35 knots at its worst, but mostly it was blowing about 25 with the occasional gust up to 30. So we're tied onto the jetty, safe as houses. We can walk into town, go to the pub, have a meal, watch the ferry glide across every couple of hours, and that was great fun, watching the ferry slide its way across in a howling gale. I don't think the camera does it justice, but that was really good fun. That was worth coming out in the cockpit and getting wet for. 30-35 knots, and the tide is now solidly coming in. This ferry has slowed down enormously. Still seems to be making headway though. So we got two mechanics on board. They both agreed that the heat exchanger was the problem. But herein lies the problem. Our engine is 20 years old. The heat exchanger is no longer made. So can it be repaired, or are we going to have a new one made? If it can be repaired, will the repair last and be a worthy repair? If it requires a new one, how long is that going to take? So these were questions that nobody could give us the answer for. So we needed to get ourselves into a more secure location. We couldn't stay on the Strangford jetty forever. That again was only a 1 or 2 night option. Whichever way it went, the heat exchanger had to be sent away, and all these things were just easier from Bangor. So we looked at the weather. There was a day. There was actually a day where we could get down the lock at a reasonable hour, with the right tide this time, and go out on the ebb. There was a southeasterly wind forecast, which meant it would blow us nicely up towards Bangor. And then all we had to do was take out Copeland Sound. And Copeland Sound is another little tricky spot, just like Strangford Lough. So I studied. I really studied. There's nothing like a trip up Strangford Lough to focus the mind. Okay, so here we are going down Strangford Lough. I sound nervous. I am. Join us next week as we head off down the Strangford Narrows for Bangor. We get hit by squalls going through Copeland Sound. Do we get our engine fixed? And the boat jobs continue. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Share it with your friends.